Okay, welcome back to the session, and the next session is really going to talk about the opportunity and potential way we take this to market in the future. As I said before, we've said that the pilot was a one-year pilot to find out whether this could actually be done, but evidently we said that we can't actually continue to fund or operate it under that current system, and therefore we need to take this out to market in the next few months. So what I'm going to start off is going back a bit about some of the things we talked about already, to talk about the potential for the system and some of those figures that were kind of bounded around by Charles and some of the other people around the participation levels and what that actually means in terms of the sustainability around this website. Because a key driver for us is taking this forward and ensuring that we actually get a sustainable solution moving forward. Okay, now this is the figures around from our active people survey. I know you'll find it's quite hard to read, but evidently we're giving these out in the packs at the end. Essentially, our active people survey is done twice a year and measures participation in sport and physical activity. It is a phone-based survey, and it reports in June and December. So, moving across from effectively left to right. You can see clearly, first of all, that around 24 million people, or 80% of the population, are currently inactive. That's that big grey box there, and they're doing effectively less than one activity per month. You then have a kind of transitionary group, which is 7%, or 3 million people, who are doing more than once a month, but less than once a week in terms of sport. And then you talk through what we talked through already, the so-called 15 million who are doing regular activity. That's around 35%, and that breaks down into two groups, which is around 8 million who are doing 1 to 2 times a week, and 7 million who are doing 3+ times a week. They are the kind of real sporty guys and women who you don't normally need to you're not trying to get them off the couch because they're already doing it. And as Charles alluded, we have done well increasing participation over the last year in moving 750,000 people from that, effectively across from that grey box into that regular activity box of that one times a week. So, where does that leave us in terms of the figures? Well, we did a survey a couple of years ago with Nielsen, looking at the potential of using web tools to get people to do more physical activity. And the key question we were asking was whether having access to a web tool would lead you to doing more physical activity. And we did this against the different groups that we already had in the active people survey, so we can start to see the impact of a web tool. So at the top, we've got, talking through the active people already, you can see that there's that 8 million. Well, around 14% of that group said they would actually do more sport and recreation if they had access to a web tool. And that equates to 1.1 million. And underneath that, you've got those very sporty people. That is around 1.3 million, or 19% of that 7 million, doing that 3+ times sport a week. And then at the bottom, we've got the grey box. And the interesting thing about the grey box is, although these are the inactive people, or the people who are doing less than one activity sport per month, actually 10% or 2.4 million of them would actually do more sport if they had access to those kind of web tools. So overall, you've got a figure there of around 4.8 million of people who would do more sport if they had access to a web tool to make it easier for them to find and play sport. As Charles alluded earlier on, the initial target is simply, you could describe it as a low-hanging fruit. That's the top lot in terms of that 8 million, that 1.1 million of that 8 million. And those are the people who we are trying to actually retain, but also get them to do a bit more sport. And I think the evidence that we get out of a number of other surveys and things is that a lot of people are doing, they may be doing one type of sport, but actually they want to do a different type of sport, and they are thinking about doing other sports. And an example of that is that during the Olympics, the handball site actually crashed due to people wanting to actually take part in handball. So people saw those new sports at the Olympics, went straight across to the NGB sites, and then they couldn't actually get on them in some of those ones. And a similar figures we get back from things like Sportivate. Even Sportivate is it's something where we get young people, 16 to 25, engaged in doing regular sport. And the sports that they are interested in, those young people, are quite often new sports, the sports they're not given access to at school. So again, that shows the market of getting people who may not actually be doing no sport, and some of those people who are doing a bit of sport, they do want variety in what they're currently offered. So, but to get those guys, that means that the website does need to be sticky. And we know that as some of the stuff that Rich has alluded to already, the importance of stickiness of getting people to come back and reuse the website. But evidently that 24 million at the bottom, getting that proportion, that 2.4 million, would actually bring in a lot more people. But to get those people in, you're going to have to create much more sticky content, produce more interventions for any kind of website development. There'll be more hand-holding and marketing. And that's more the long-term target. And that's where you could start to see opportunities out there with people, with the NHS, in terms of meeting that obesity challenge and other things in terms of long-term physical activity improvements. So, if we got that 4.8 million, adding up all those other people from previous slide, if we just got 10% of that total, to look and use the website once a month, that would equate into 480,000 visits per month. And that would translate into 15,000 visits per day. And in terms of the website, we don't see that as being, we see that actually as quite a conservative figure at the moment in terms of where Spogo could be going and some things you've seen already. And as an example of that, you can see the top table at the moment does around 75,000 unique visits a day. So that's really gives you some ideas from what we see out the participation figures about some of the ideas of the potential visitors that could use the website and utilise it. And of course, we've talked a lot about sustainability. A key thing for us is to ensure the site is sustainable. So, based on those kind of figures, we need to look at the types of revenue options that might be out there to actually make Spogo sustainable in the long term. So, evidently, the top ones we got there is things like advertising, affiliate advertising, etc. They're the obvious ones you have alongside website to generate income. But then the other opportunities can be around things like limited campaign sponsorships, such as you've seen the ones already, the Asda Kids one, you have Sainsbury's Kids, that a lot of times the big supermarkets run campaigns that actually, limited campaigns, particularly around linking people to local clubs or doing initiatives with kids. And there's potential around that. Permanent sponsorship of the website could be another option in terms of bringing in revenue generation. And booking fee and booking commission. Colin's already talked about that. As we alluded to early, at the moment we're not charging anything in terms of the commissions. We are simply getting back the credit card fee at the moment. And if you look at, certainly in the short term, the revenue from booking will be essentially taking a normal booking would be very low, because we're only going to have probably 600 sites by the end of June. And as Colin said, a lot of that is due to the legacy systems. It's just simply that those three big operators, that is all they could get on within that time period. But where you can start to look at that in terms of these commissions is actually selling the off-peak time for those operators. So as Colin said, the operators at the moment will fill their peak period all the time, and they won't need that help. And that's typically the peak periods are between 5 and 9 during the weekdays, and at the weekends those peak periods will be around 9 and 4 on a Saturday and Sunday. But if you can start to fill up those other areas during the day, those periods extend that peak period, 4 to 3 o'clock, or fill up times around lunch times, the operators will bite your hand off to fill those space, because that's the bit they need to start filling at a time when they have to meet their targets for that local authority. So again, there could be opportunities around that, commissions over that. And once you start to develop things on here, you could have algorithms that, if you get closer to a booking time, they will give you a certain amount of time, you get a reduced fee. So all these things you can think about in terms of potential revenue generation. Again, other ideas are, for example, paid for user insight reports. Evidently, as the system develops, more insight takes on more members. It's evidently going to generate quite a lot of insight, and that is very important to the market. Opportunities around that. And then you've got ideas around premium memberships for clubs, coaches, personal trainers. So that could be that you publish the basic personal trainer info for free, but then if they want to add extra stuff on top of that, you actually charge them for that, posting that extra information, which is very much in the kind of LinkedIn type premium type model. So what we're saying for you here today is that we very much welcome ideas from you in terms of how you could possibly generate revenue. Here's some few ideas we've had, and also welcome ideas on initial capital costs versus profit sharing. And we'll talk more about that later in terms of when we talk into the next steps in terms of the procurement process. But there are also other opportunities to consider and things like that. You heard evidently about the local ticket database at the moment, which we're bidding for. We should know about that by mid-February. 5 million records is quite a lot of people we could get to reach very quickly with this website. We'd also be putting into this data that we have from a lot of our other schemes within Sport England. So things like Sportivate, we talked about that already. That's a database of 37,000 young people between the ages of 16 and 25. Again, we talked about that idea of how do we reach those people with digital. That could easily, very quickly, you see how that can quickly jumpstart the project and meet some of those numbers we talked through before. There's also the education sector. And we said that was a threat early on about the changes that are going on in the education sector, but it's also an opportunity in engaging in terms of developing Spogo. So we know that, as we said, a lot of schools, 59% of sports hall space, 52% of playing field stock, they're moving out of the local authority sector into academies or free schools. They are looking for opportunities to manage their assets in a new way, to maximise their assets when their main funding is still decreasing. So how can you get to them and produce a kind of maybe a booking solution that is a low-cost booking solution that they could very quickly plug into, that they can that you can manage that space on their behalf? Those are kind of ideas around potentially engaging with the education sector to generate revenue. And lastly, you've got the NHS. Again, another area we haven't really explored much with at the moment, but as you see before the obesity challenge, it could be a massive potential area. We have the obvious avenues we've already talked about is supplying data into things like Change for Life and NHS Choices, but ultimately, the big area could be around GP fund holding. So this would be GPs passporting people with obesity or physical activity programs across to Spogo and leisure operators, and what part Spogo could actually play in that. And some of you have seen the media this week. Westminster is already moving that way. So Westminster Council this week announced that it was basically people who've been diagnosed by their GP as clinically obese would not get their benefits unless they'd actually prove that they'd taken part in sport and physical activity. So where they've been passed across from their GP fund holder to actually take part in sport and physical activity, they would then go and use a swipe card in their local leisure centre to actually prove that they're doing sport and physical activity. Whether that would actually work, as some people actually said, people just go in, swipe out, but it is a way that that is the direction of travel in terms of how GPs are now much more in control of their budget and much more trying to get people to take part in physical activity. Okay, so that's talking very quickly around some of those opportunities that you get there in terms of the figures. Now I'm going to talk through where we see the main areas of the project moving forward. So this is where we see the potential delivery model for Spogo. So these are the key areas that we see the project coming around. So what I'll do, I'll quickly, because I appreciate you may not be able to see them from where you are, I'll quickly read them out. They are around KPI management, business planning, commercial services, project management, governance, technical design, build, marketing analytics services, customer care, data management services, and sector engagement. It's pretty much obvious when you've heard from the pilot and the complexities of the pilot that we don't see that one organisation can actually run and deliver this by themselves. This will be, to take Spogo forward, it will need evidently a consortia approach with tight project management. And I would say we are open to suggestions when we come to the feedback of whether we've actually got the right areas, all the areas down here, and whether you think there are other areas which Spogo would need to address. But this is certainly from what the feedback we get from the pilot. These are the key areas we think Spogo will actually need to move forward. So just to quickly run through some of the things that we see. The KPI management, yes, we need to have strong KPIs. We need to prove evidently that the service is running in the right direction. Pretty obvious, that one. The business planning one, as we said, we need a robust commercial model moving this project forward, and from our experience on that, we need to have a lot of information coming back on financial accountability. In terms of project management and governance, Sport England require a strong governance structure put in. Evidently, being a government agency, we're bound by auditing from the National Audit Office, and therefore we would need a strong governance structure put in place. We also need to establish, I think, clear lines of communication between Sport England and the key provider in terms of leading in certain areas. I think that's come through strongly from the pilot, particularly in terms of negotiating, for example, deals with any headline sponsors or advertising type things like that. We need to be very clear that we're joined up in terms of messages and marketing messages that go out there to the marketplace. The other thing within that is evidently strong project management. Within central government, we all use the old Prince 2, but it is important that if you are working across with multiple partners under that whoever is the lead partner has a strong project management process in place, and that clearly has all the kind of usual, that manages all that risk. Moving on, technical design and build. We're not being specific about where we see the solution at the moment, but the key elements is that it evidently needs to be scalable and it needs to be flexible. And you have all the key areas that you'd normally get up there, front-end development, systems development, data integration, matching, hosting, etc. But also in terms of that flexibility, we need to be able to quickly bolt on other things that might come up. For example, you might be doing things around loyalty cards, particularly if you start working with things like supermarkets or other people like that. But also you need to develop things like white label front ends for other websites, so running campaigns for other people, other organisations. So where you might be working with the Asda's and Tesco's, it might be a Spogo back end, but it will have a kind of it might have a Tesco kind of feel to it. Marketing analytics, again, this is going to be the key thing in providing information back to the marketplace and also monitoring kind of performance. You're going to have a CRM in there. It's going to be utilising things like the local ticket database, other databases in terms of consumer information, passing that out, getting those messages out there. Another key area. Customer care. I think this is an area where we say it's kind of emerged over the last few months with the pilot project, and it's another area that we would see being very scalable, particularly around as the online booking comes online. This is the kind of area where you want a scalable. We expect this area to increase as more bookings come through. Although we'd hope that every consumer is having a great service, and therefore we're not dealing with any kind of lost bookings, etc., and things like that. Data management. This is, again, I wouldn't say this is key, as we talked about earlier, about in terms of ensuring consumer confidence in the system. We've talked through all the kind of complexities that we've learned in terms of cleansing NGB data so far, but keeping that data up to date. And we want to ensure that effectively move to a self-validation system, effectively. But to do that, you've got to evidently get the people who are providing that data to want to up-to-date their data. You've got to give them something back, and that means that very closely this has got to be linked to the fruit of the sector engagement. So that also within that kind of area is the stuff that in terms of we talked before about creating the data standards for the industry, working with the Open Data Institute. Spogo is going to be a project, one of the first projects taken forward by the Open Data Institute. So that gives us a great opportunity to actually develop those standards with the marketplace and in terms of the sport and recreation sector. And I would say, again, it's one of those things that you shouldn't underestimate the amount of time that goes into that data management and the amount of complexities there are in linking and cleansing that data. And lastly, I think, the sector engagement, I think this is, again, one of the key areas. And, you can have all the lovely technical solution you want, or you can have all that data management, but unless you engage well with the sector, it's not going to work, because these are the guys who are going to supply that data to you and supply those opportunities for those operators. And I think the pilot again showed about the time that that takes. So the key thing, you know, we'll be looking for is building those relationships with those operators and other people to ensure that you can achieve sustainability. Okay, so just concluding some of the kind of general principles in the delivery of Spogo. I think what we're saying is we want to have a facilitation role. I think what we're looking for as a consortia taking this forward will be the ones who lead on it and to deliver it on everyday basis. And it may be that, you know, I think for the pilot project, what it has shown is that they, you know, the success has been very much in the people that they got there, the people skills, and in terms of having a team that was dedicated in terms of taking the project forward. You know, people that, and having very close links with those suppliers underneath the project. As we said before, we expect the lead supplier to manage the day-to-day activities and to coordinate that across any of the consortia. And what we want is, we talked before about the team, a tight, co-located, agile, reactive, startup style team is like to be more efficient, and that's the important. That's what very much what the pilot's shown us. Now, in terms of some of the reusables, as we said before, the brand and design, website work is all totally reusable. Parts of the pilot development are going to be reusable. So, you know, we'll talk through the bits around the online booking and the kind of how long it's taken us to get to that. But those kind of, that connector software, that the pilot in a way has done all that hard work of getting that connector software ready that can be reused. And all those agreements that have so far been signed with the NGBs and operators actually data suppliers can be novated across. So I'm now going to hand over to Neil, who's going to talk through the next steps and